Just a few comments about our speaker, Dr. Miller. Adam is a lifelong buddy of mine, and when I saw the agenda for this program, I thought he'd be a perfect fit for one of the speakers this evening. He's a local kid, went to Whitefish Bay High School, actually took over the shortstop position from Craig Counsell on our baseball team. Does anyone know what Craig's doing now? What's he up to? Is he in the area?
No, he calls for advice, Brian.
Yeah.
You know,
So after high school, Adam went on to UW-Madison, where after completing his third year of school, Marquette Dental School approached him about entering dental school a year early. And then he got into oral surgery, and then he went to med school at the University of Pittsburgh and became a maxillofacial surgeon. He's had a number of interesting posts. Most recently, he just completed a 6-year tour in Malaysia. So please help me give a warm Milwaukee welcome to Adam Miller.
Thanks, Brian. It's really cool to be introduced for a talk on aging by somebody I've known since 6th grade. And if you want a humorous story, you can ask him about how he beat me up in 6th grade after being in Milwaukee for just 2 weeks. You know. This is being filmed for some colleagues in Malaysia, so I thought it'd be fun to teach you a little bit of Bahasa Malaysia. Okay? The word I've chosen for you is boleh, B-O-L-E-H. So can you say boleh? Boleh. Better than that, come on. Boleh. Boleh means can, yes, will do, I'm in, of course. Let's do this. It's a great word, high energy. And if your spouse asks you tomorrow, honey, I think we should cut down on our sugar and we should increase our exercise, you may want to respond by saying, Boleh. Yeah, very good. You guys are awesome. We've got 40 minutes to cover aging. It's a big topic, okay? But I want to start by asking you a few questions. The first is, how long do you want to live? 100, I like that. Nice. I like 110, I like that. Anyone know what the maximum life expectancy is right now? Oldest person ever live is 120. Yeah, Jean Clement in France. Oldest American on record? 119 and a half. Yeah. Why do you want to live that long? What's your purpose? What do you want to do with those years? You know, my financial advisor asks me every year, how much money do you expect to make? How much do you want in terms of return on your investments? But he always asks me, why? What do you want to do with it? Because you all know, and I know, that if we have a why, if we own our why, it allows us to manage the hows to get to our goal, right? What's your why? We've been asking people around the world these questions, including what you fear most about aging, and the fourth question, how much control do you think you have over aging and your health? So by show of hands, how many of you think that your genes determine 50% of your health? Most of the hands. How many people believe your genes determine less than 50% of your health? A few hands. How many of you think that your genes are the main determinant of your health? Your longevity, your risk for disease? A few hands. The vast majority think it's about 50-50. And this is taking us back to the old nature versus nurture argument. I'm excited to tell you tonight you have 85% control of your health fate in the palm of your hand, barring any catastrophic event. We know that your genetic makeup determines only about 15% of your health, barring any catastrophic event. So the question is, how can you leverage that 85% to live a longer, healthier life? And that's what we want to get into tonight. So I've been asking people around the world, we've got about 100 people responding so far, these questions: how long you want to live, why, what do you fear, how much control do you have? And there's a wide range of answers. Some say my life isn't even my own. I'm here until Jesus takes me home. We've got a 25-year-old graduate student from Togo, Africa, where the average life expectancy is 56, who wants to live to be 100. He has a very un-American view of aging people. He sees that sage figure evolving. He says that the mind of an old man is like a labyrinth. He's very wise. I like that. That's awesome. What we've concluded so far is that people want to live a long life as long as they're healthy. And the main concerns that we've found so far, the fears, are losing their mind and mobility. Those are the two key fears. What we've also seen is that those people have a purpose. They know their why. They're much more decisive in their response to the survey, and they seem to have a plan for life. Likewise, those who have a model for healthy aging, they have an aging champion in their life, someone they can look to and say, I want to be like that when I'm 70, or I want to be like that guy when I'm 80, still skiing out west. Those people answered the survey with much more decisive fashion and had a clear plan for life. This is life simplified. You're born, you mature to about 30, and unfortunately, in the United States, your peak social equity is about 30 years of age. That's also your peak health. And then this thing happens called aging. There's 3 key paths or general paths you can follow. You can hit the average. We've added 10 years to the average life expectancy since 1950. Whether those are good, healthy years or not is debatable. Maximum life expectancy is 120. And unfortunately, more and more people are falling onto the red line of chronic ill health. Every 30 seconds in this country, a lower limb is amputated on a diabetic patient. About every minute in this country, someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. 70% of you are either obese or overweight. And 25% of you between the ages of 50 and 65 have cardiovascular disease, the number one killer. My goal is to keep you off that chronic ill health line. So how much control do you have? We said your fate is largely in your hands. In order to show you how to leverage that, we've got these key objectives today. I need to give you a framework for aging, what it is and what it isn't. I need to shed some light on what it means to be aging in America in the year 2015. We need to look at some champions of aging and find out what we can learn from them. We're going to look at a novel therapy for dementia. Out of the top killers in America, I want to focus on dementia. Since 2009, it's moved from the number 6 killer in America to the number 3 killer in America. It's alarming. And then we're going to give you a few tips on aging well. All right, along the way, we're going to meet some interesting people. We're going to meet a woman who's on the edge of suicide because of her dementia diagnosis. We're going to meet a dizzy Olympic fencing coach from France. And we're going to go in and look at an autopsy of a nun's brain, Sister Bernadette. And then I'm going to tell you why you may want to measure your pee tomorrow morning. So who thinks that aging is a disease? Who thinks it's pathologic and therefore we should treat it like a disease? Okay, we got one taker. I like that. The truth is we don't know for sure, okay? So that means the majority of you think it's a natural process? Yeah, I happen to agree with you. The reality is every day in this country, people are dying of old age. They don't have diabetes, they don't have heart disease, they haven't had a stroke, and yet they die of what we call frailty, old age. It seems that we are programmed for procreative success, to have children and see our children have children and then check out. Now, most aging specialists believe that an average life expectancy of 80 in the US today is leaving about 10 good years on the table. In other words, we should have an average life expectancy more along the lines of 90 years of age. So that's what's at stake here. That's what's at stake in that 85% in your decisions on what you think, eat, say, and do. Okay? What aging has multiple mechanisms to it. Okay? Think about your automobile for a minute. You buy a new car, it looks great on the outside, on the inside it runs well, but over time it has multiple mechanisms for aging, right? The tires wear down, the pistons develop friction and heat, the spark plugs, the electrical gets a little bit fuzzy and starts acting up. There are multiple mechanisms for aging in an automobile, right? Similarly, in the human body, there are multiple mechanisms. There is a depletion in your stem cells, and without that reservoir of stem cells, it's hard to generate new tissue. One of the key features of aging is a breakdown in communication. Now, you all know that whether it's in your marriage or at your workplace, a breakdown in communication instigates ill health, right? Dis-ease. That's happening at a cellular level. As you age, it's the communication between cells to promote and trigger normal physiology breaks down. How many of you ate lunch today? So you're not among the 15% in the study last week who skipped lunch because you're just too busy. So you expect that food you ingested to be broken down and then the micronutrients from that meal absorbed into your small intestine and put to work in your body, right? Did you know that as you age, the body has a deregulation of nutrient sensing? In other words, there are certain nutrients that the body doesn't sense as well, and therefore they either pass through you or they're absorbed and they're not taken up in the cells and put to work. The mitochondria age, they build up oxidative stress and their ability to produce energy is not as good. And then maybe some of you have heard of telomeres, the end caps on chromosomes that are thought to be a key marker of your biologic age. The truth is, knowing this aging wheel with the multiple spokes, it is irrational to think that one blood draw with one marker would tell you your biologic age. Likewise, it's irrational to think that there'd be one magic bullet, one magic pill you could take that could go around and turn off all these aging mechanisms. What we know is that aging is probably not a disease, but accelerated aging is. What causes accelerated aging? Inflammation. Al Gore told Congress in 2007 that the planet has a fever. Remember that? The inconvenient truth, right? What he should have said is that the people on the planet have a fever also. We're seeing a continual rise in inflammatory-based diseases. We know that inflammation is at the heart of cardiovascular disease and cancer and pulmonary diseases. But what is inflammation? It seems to be this wastebasket term that we throw around. I'm going to give you a simple framework for it. Inflammation is a normal response to stressors. Stressors come in various forms. Physical stress, I get tackled at a football game and got a contusion on my leg. Mental stress, I'm in a bad relationship, job isn't so good. Chemical stress, I ingest a foreign chemical and my body reacts by getting inflamed. Okay. Inflammation is our key target for slowing aging. All right. Let's take a look at a patient. This is Maestro. He's a 72-year-old French Olympic fencing coach. I had the pleasure of taking care of him a few years back and then got to go visit him in Paris.
Dans la catégorie des attaques.
Got a fantastic mustache, this guy, but he's got a zest for life that no one else has met.
Le bras doit aller 2 fois plus vite que les
Look at
jambes.
how useful this man is. Look at his nimbleness and his movement. You're going to see it in a minute.
Tiens, et la cible elle est toujours là.
Look at that movement.
J'ai fait peur.
This is his passion in life. This is his why for getting out of bed in the morning. And yet for 3 years, he wasn't doing that. He was sitting in a chair, barking orders and coaching from the sideline. What was keeping him from fencing? Well, I found out when I went for a visit. The manager of the camp came running up, merci, 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 gave me a big hug, and she said, look at him, he's fencing. She said, yes, 7 hours a day, he's fencing. It's wonderful, he's an inspiration. She said, no, you don't understand. Before your surgery, he wasn't fencing for 3 years. I said, what did we do? We didn't do anything special. What we did is take out a bunch of infected teeth, debrided his bone of inflammation and infection, put in some dental implants and some teeth, and sent him back to Paris. Apparently a week and a half after getting back to Paris, he was back to fencing. The manager told me that he was so dizzy and unstable for 3 years that he couldn't fence. Unchecked inflammation in one part of the body can affect organ function in another part of the body. So we've looked at aging, we've seen the role of inflammation at accelerating aging, we've met a patient. Now let's take a look at what it's like to age in America in the year 2015. Einstein's students came to him and said, Professor, we're about to start a new research project. What's the number one most important thing we should ask before we start this? And Einstein said, that's simple. You should ask, is the world a kind or unkind place? So is America kind or unkind to the aging population? You be the judge. In the year 2000, we had 69 working people for every one demented person. By 2050, if trends continue, we'll only have 20 working people for every one demented person. We score as a country number 15 to number 45 in all major health parameters when compared to 123 other countries. 41% of our population has less than $500 saved for an emergency, including a medical emergency. It's a pretty stressful way to live. 7% of people say now that they'll never retire. That's up from 2% just 10 years ago. 1 in 10 adults is now on an antidepressant. 50% of people in this country who have cardiovascular disease find out that they have heart disease when they're in the emergency room being told they have a heart attack for the first time. 50% of people who have a heart attack in this country had the top 5 risk factors controlled. Clearly, there's a gap in surveillance for the number 1 killer in America. 30% of our population has sleep disorders. 2% of our spending, only 2% goes to prevention. And for all that, we're number 1 in the world in percentage of our GDP spending on healthcare. I should add that the fastest growing segment of our population is 65 and older, and the fastest dying medical specialty is geriatrics. Who's going to take care of even those 7% that want to keep working? Let's bring this down to day-to-day living. Dr. Jen Lerner from Harvard showed us a very interesting study about how our mood affects our spending. She took a study cohort, put them in front of a computer, and asked them to rate their mood. Are you happy, sad, or neutral today? Then she took a water bottle and put it on the screen and asked them what they're willing to pay for that water bottle. Those who said they were sad, on average, paid $5 more for the same water bottle than those who were neutral or happy. Now, if you pair that knowledge with the fact that the number 1 cause of household arguments in America is money and finance, you can see in a very simple fashion how a vicious cycle can develop day in, day out. I think awareness can disarm this. Now, Brian and I sat down and tried to brainstorm a matrix to understand what it's like to age in America and what is influencing healthcare decisions in America today. You've got 3 main spheres: the regulators, the medical marketplace, including hospitals, insurance companies, big pharma. By the way, did you know that the average American gets 16 hours of marketing from big pharma each year? That's far more time than you get with your primary care doctor, right? So big pharma's in there, consumers. Each of those spheres has resources. They have responsibilities to uphold with those resources. And then based on how well they do, they get rewarded or punished. And there's 2 glaring things that jumped out at us. One is there's very little incentive for you to stay independent of the matrix. In other words, to stay healthy. The matrix thrives when you get sick, when you need studies, when you need drugs, when you need surgery, right? The other thing that we couldn't avoid is what I call the chief complainer phenomenon. The truth of the matter is, and I'm not here to bash traditional medicine, I love medicine, integrated medicine, Eastern philosophies, Western philosophies. But the truth is, in 3rd year medical school, I was taught to build rapport with you so that I could extract your chief complaint. And then I'm supposed to focus in on that chief complaint, take care of that, and move you along. I happen to think now that the best doctor-patient interaction of the future is going to be those doctors who ask, who are you? What do you want? And where are you going? But for right now, you're seen as complainers. There are other things at work in our environment that are not as obvious. Some of you may have seen this study a couple weeks ago telling us that it's harder to lose weight now than it was in the 1980s. If you ate the same diet, exercised the same today as you did in the 1980s, you'd be on average about 10% heavier today, which seems really unfair, right? We should be moving in the other direction. What's going on? What's at work? Well, they think, the study's authors, that it's bugs, drugs, and chemicals. Bugs. We're using a lot more antibiotics. We're eating a lot more meat, and a lot of that meat is treated with antibiotics, which alters our flora, the bugs on our skin and the bugs in our GI tract, which makes it harder to lose weight. Drugs. We're taking a lot more prescription drugs. You saw how many antidepressants we're using? Many of those antidepressants have weight gain as a side effect. Chemicals. It's estimated that we're putting 4,000 new chemicals into our environment every year. Many of those chemicals bind to receptors in our body that make it harder to lose weight. They have an interesting affinity for estrogen receptors, for instance. So bugs, drugs, and chemicals. Is America a kind or unkind place to be aging in the year 2015? Well, 85% control, guys, of your health is in your hands, based on what you think, say, eat, and do. So what are we going to do? I've got to give you a caveat. There's a huge industry hoping that you will think there's a magic bullet and you will spend your dollars on that. GlaxoSmithKline paid $750 million in 2008, just before we entered a recession, for research from a Dr. David Sinclair at Harvard. Now, what kind of research would he have that would be worth that kind of money at that time in history. What Dr. Sinclair showed in a mouse model was a way to mimic calorie restriction. In other words, continue eating the same diet, but take this pill, and you get the benefits of calorie restriction. Glaxo and many others thought he may have stumbled upon the internal fountain of youth and a way to manipulate it. So they dropped a ton of money in his lap. They put 60 people to work, and 5 years later, they shut it down. And I don't fully understand how that impacts the matrix, but I know it has to some way. Okay? The company was shut down. They did give us some amazing information about resveratrol, grapeseed extract, and some insights, but the truth is they brought no product to market. So what that leaves us with is needing to find a different path to healthy aging. And I believe that begins with finding an aging champion in your life. This is my aging champion. This is Grandpa Rex, affectionately known as Sexy Rexy. His boat growing up literally said that on the back. He's now 91 years old. He works about 7 hours most days doing carpentry and electrical and helping to fix barns. He and my grandmother for the past 27 years have been touring the United States in a mobile home like college kids. They stop religiously at 4:30 and have happy hour, no matter where they are. Don't call them, don't bother them. It's happy hour. They have a massive network of friends across the country. And at the age of 84, he pulled me aside and said, we're not going to refill the Viagra. I think I finally wore it out. Aging champion, as far as I'm concerned. This is what I heard growing up. Adam, you got to get outside. You got to get outside and literally play in the dirt. We now know that kids who grow up on a farm have fewer allergies and seem to be healthier. So you got to play. Life's not all work. You got to get outside and play, and you got to play with your friends. But you got to be home on time for dinner because being with the family is critical. You got to finish your vegetables. In fact, you're going to sit at that table until you finish your vegetables. You got to get to sleep on time or else there's consequences. You got to say your prayers and honor God before bed. And you can't sit around eating bonbons all day. I don't even know what that means. But in there was a message that you got to do something with your life, right? You got to have a purpose. That's a local aging champion who's influenced my life. What about globally? Who's best at living longest? Well, we can thank National Geographic in 2004 for putting out a report that yielded the blue zones. Many of you have heard of the blue zones? Okay, so these are pockets around the world between Okinawa, Japan, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, and Loma Linda, where people tend to live to be 100 or more. And they don't just live long lives, these people are having sex into their 80s and 90s. They're healthy, okay? What National Geographic wanted to answer was the same thing that you all are hungry for. What are the commonalities between these different groups? And are there enough commonalities that we can put together in a recipe for healthy aging and apply it to our lives? And this was the magical 9 things they came up with. Number 1, these people move. Very few of them actually go to a gym and work out on machines. They walk places, they bike places, they garden. Okay? They eat less. The Japanese have a principle they call harihachibu, which means they eat to about 80% full, and then they stop. They eat less because they serve smaller portion sizes. The average American underestimates their caloric intake by 15%. The average American, interestingly, also underestimates their monthly spending by 15%. They eat less. They eat a plant-based diet. Legumes, whole grains, 2 vegetables per meal is at the core of Blue Zone's living. They enjoy happy hour. Okay? Moderate alcohol intake seems to be cardioprotective for the majority of people. And this is so important. The Japanese call their purpose their ikigai. If you ask a Japanese person when they're going to retire, they'll respond by talking to you about their ikigai, their purpose. Okay? Consider this. Just before Y2K, there was a downtick in the death rate in America. Just after Y2K, there was an uptick in the death rate. Researchers believe that people were willing themselves to live longer. My question for you is, if people at the end of life can will themselves to live longer, to see their kids come home and say goodbye, or to see Y2K, can you not activate that same energy tomorrow in your life to be healthier? I think you can. These people downshift, they do yoga and meditation. Did you know there's research showing that doing meditation just 2 hours a week can slow the disease progression in Alzheimer's? Literally, the hippocampus, the memory center that normally shrinks as dementia progresses, it slows down from just meditation alone. There's no FDA-approved drug that can slow disease progression in Alzheimer's dementia. These people have faith. They belong to faith-based groups, and there's plenty of research showing that there's a physiology to faith. Longer and healthier lives are plugged into a faith group. They emphasize family, and here's the biggest ROI, return on investment, as a conclusion in the blue zones. It's your tribe. Being plugged in, having community seems to be the most important of all 9 for extending life and living healthier. So if you've stopped going to your men's group, if you've stopped doing your exercise classes, if you've stopped playing mahjong with the girls, whatever it is, tomorrow you got to seriously consider getting plugged back in. Okay? Lifestyle medicine works at preventing major diseases. Heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer. What about dementia? Well, you need to understand that Alzheimer's dementia is now being referred to as type 3 diabetes, which should tell you that sugar management and insulin management is at the core of the pathologic changes related to Alzheimer's dementia. So anything that's helpful in preventing heart disease and diabetes is going to be helpful at reducing dementia. Let's shift gears though for a minute. What happens when dementia starts, when it sets in? Early stages of dementia. Does lifestyle medicine have a role once the disease has been initiated? Dementia, in really simple terms, line drawings here, begins with neuronal shrinkage. The nerves in your brain start to shrink. You get a loss of blood supply, which instigates more neuronal shrinkage, and then neuronal loss. And eventually, you start to get volumetric changes, first usually in the memory center, the hippocampus. Okay. Left unchecked and living a pro-inflammatory lifestyle, you can see the development of Alzheimer's disease and advanced changes in the brain. Profound changes. This gives me an opportunity to introduce Sister Bernadette. Sister Bernadette was part of the Sisters of Notre Dame study. She was one of 600 nuns that agreed to have her body studied upon death. What made this group of nuns interesting is that they loved brain games. They were always quizzing each other, doing word cross and word puzzles. It was the daily activity for them. At the age of 85, Sister Bernadette had a heart attack and died. Just before her death, she had neurocognitive testing and was found to be in the 90th percentile for all adults in America. This was one sharp old lady. On autopsy, her brain looked like that. She had advanced Alzheimer's disease. So what gives? How is that possible that you could have that amount of destruction and still function in the 90th percentile? Well, it brings up a principle that we all need to own, and that is it's functional reserve. In this case, cognitive reserve. All right? The bottom line is this. If you know how to train and properly nourish the remaining healthy portions of an organ, it can usually adapt and figure out how to get around those damaged parts to continue to perform at a high level. Okay? Let's see how this applies to a patient. This is a real patient of Dr. Dale Brednisen. This is a 67-year-old professional with a 2-year history of memory loss. She can't remember 4 digits. The streets or roads that were once familiar are now no longer so. She's having trouble finishing reports for work. And she goes to her primary care doctor, especially concerned because she watched her mother die a slow, painful death from Alzheimer's disease. Her primary care doc says, it's early dementia, and I'm sorry, but there's just nothing that can be done. And unfortunately, he writes in the chart memory problems, which precludes her from getting long-term care, health coverage. Sitting at home and reflecting on all of this and thinking about her mom, she decides that she's going to commit suicide. She picks up the phone and calls a few friends to say goodbye, and one of them convinces her to come see a different neurologist. Thankfully, she did that because 3 months later, she was completely symptom-free. She was back to work. And she's now 2.5 years into the protocol, and she's still symptom-free. Here's what's even more fascinating. She got sick, she got the flu during that 3-month period. And that week that she had the flu, her symptoms returned. She had memory issues, couldn't finish her reports, cognitive thinking. She went back on the protocol, and the symptoms went away. So what did they do to get her back in shape and back to work in just 3 months? Certainly there had to be some new high-tech, new technology implemented. Certainly there had to be a new drug of some kind, right? No. Along with 9 other patients in this study, they were put into a protocol that is really based in lifestyle medicine. 6 out of the 10 patients that were entered in Dr. Dale Bredensen's protocol got back to work with mild to moderate dementia. This didn't work with advanced dementia, but mild to moderate dementia, 6 out of 10 got back to work, and this study is now up to 50 patients. All right, if you're dozing off a little bit, you got to lean in. Okay, this is the money. You can start doing this tomorrow. You don't have to wait until you have symptoms of dementia. Okay, and these are not complicated things. This is low tech. Keep in mind that the total protocol was 36 points. She was only able to adhere to 14 of those points. Okay, but it introduces this concept of a therapeutic load. And I don't have time to get into it right now in detail, but the reality is this was the right combination of things for her to tip into a repair mode and to stop the destruction mode. All right, what did she do? She removed sugar. You all know sugar is pro-inflammatory. She lost 20 pounds. Extra fat, especially around the midsection, is very pro-inflammatory. So she got rid of that extra weight. She eliminated gluten and increased vegetables. Vegetables, aside from having fiber that help regulate blood sugar, have phytonutrients that cross the blood-brain barrier and help reduce oxidative stress. She reduced her stress by beginning yoga, actually became a yoga instructor, and began meditating. She took melatonin. You've all heard of melatonin? It's a chemical in the body that initiates the sleep cascade and is probably the number 2 or 3 most powerful antioxidant in the body. It turns out people who have dementia have a significant drop-off in melatonin production from the pineal gland. So she supplemented with melatonin. She moved from being a short sleeper to being a normal sleeper, 7 hours a night. Short sleepers have a higher risk for dementia. They tend to be more pro-inflammatory. There's a few micronutrients that she added in. B12, really important for the nervous system. It's a common nutrient deficiency in America. She added D3. Remember our aging wheel with the spokes and the different mechanisms? D3 helps cell-to-cell communication. It improves the efficiency of cell-to-cell talk, okay? In addition to boosting the immune system. She took fish oil. Fish oil is a great anti-inflammatory. The DHA component is really important for nerve growth. She took coenzyme Q10, okay, to help with energy in the mitochondria. And she optimized her oral hygiene because she doesn't want to end up like Maestro, our French Olympic fencing coach. Now, a little more controversial here, she reinstated hormone replacement therapy at the age of 67. Ostensibly, she is far removed from the change of life from menopause. She's a little controversial, but I actually agree with it. Estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are all known to be neuroprotective. Okay? The last 2 are really interesting. She fasted. So she made sure that there was 12 to 13 hours between dinner and having breakfast the next day. Some of you have heard of this already, intermittent fasting. But why is it useful for brain fitness? When we fast, a chemical called BDNF is stimulated. It's known colloquially, I guess, as miracle grow for the brain. When I was in medical school, we were told if you have too many beers and you kill those nerve cells, you don't get them back. We now know that's not true. The adult brain has the ability to perform neurogenesis, to grow new nerves, okay? She fasted. Stimulation of BDNF. The other thing that happens when you fast in the brain is you get a cleanup called autophagy. Incidentally, I should mention that the other activities that stimulate the miracle grow for nerve development in the brain, exercise and getting sunlight, okay? Critical. The last one is your biggest return on investment. Hands down, she got back to exercising. It's got to be a minimum of 30 minutes. It's got to be a minimum of 4 times a week. And you got to get into 60% of your maximum heart rate to get the benefits of slowing the progress of dementia. No doubt about it, exercise is the key to brain fitness. And if you haven't read the book Spark, I would highly recommend you pick up that book. All right, the new era of medicine is going to be emphasizing self-assessment. How many people have a Fitbit? All right, about the same as the last group. Only 10% of wearables like Fitbit are being sold to those 55 years of age and older, the group that I think needs them the most. We're soon going to be wearing clothing that's going to tell you how much muscle contraction you're getting, okay? But guys, we need it. We need it. We're in the era of stress apnea. You've heard of sleep apnea, but we now know that people who are in the workforce, who are busy and are focused on their work, they hold their breath. A study of Fortune 500 CEOs showed that simply by training them to breathe again, belly breathing, got 50% of them off their blood pressure medication. We're not breathing. The other thing we're not doing is going to the bathroom. A study came out last week that 21% of people said that they hold their bladder to an uncomfortable level to get through meetings and get through their drive home and before they get to the restroom. So think about this. When I do surgery, I rarely use general anesthesia. I typically use sedation. If the surgery goes more than 2 to 3 hours, patients will start to wiggle around, get uncomfortable, blood pressure goes up a little bit, heart rate goes up a little bit, and the young nurse will say, "Doctor, should we give more medication? Should we give more pain medication, more sedation?" And I'll say, "No." She'll think I'm a typical jerk surgeon. And I'll say, "But what you can do is you can put a bladder catheter in." So she'll begrudgingly get the catheter and do her thing. And then we'll count out 100, 200, 300 cc's is where the average person has the urge to urinate. The highest we've ever seen come out in a surgery is about 800 cc's. And then a magical thing happens. The heart rate comes back down, the blood pressure comes back down, and the patient stops squirming. They usually sigh just like that, and they go back to sleep without any additional drugs. So I started thinking, if that's the response of a patient who has sedation on board, I wonder, as we all run the rat race, what is happening to our physiology as we run around and hold a big distended bladder. And so I did a little study on myself, and I found the first day that my brain didn't have the trigger to go to the bathroom until I was holding 600 cc's of urine. I had developed over time through my residency and my busy work the ability to hold it and distend the bladder. A stretched muscle gets angry, right? If you were doing that to your bicep, it would be uncomfortable and it would cause a response. By day 2, 3, and 4, I was able, through mindfulness, just being aware, to get my urine output down to a more normal level. We're not breathing, and many of us are not taking the time to just go to the bathroom. All right, we need to keep moving. I want to leave you with my framework for a day, okay? I don't agree with the American Academy of Sleep Medicine that has the yin-yang logo, that we're either awake or asleep. I think that we should approach the day in thirds, that 1/3 of our day is high intensity living, all in, going for it. 1/3 is high intensity recovery, deep, nourishing sleep. But there's a third in the middle that I think as a paradigm we need to bring into this discussion. That's the break check. Am I going to the bathroom? Am I breathing? Am I moving? Okay? The break check. All right? The other principle that I want to leave you with is calibrating time. We all get out of bed, we jump on the treadmill, and before you know it, you've lost your sense of time. I start the day by taking my smartphone and typing in 6 minutes on the timer and set it aside. And then I do something nourishing for my mind and something nourishing for my body, like stretching. So I get on the floor, I'll read my Bible, I'll do a devotion, I'll read poetry, whatever it is, but I don't look at that for 6 minutes. And then the bell goes off and then I get my day going. What that does for me is later in the day where I feel like I'm falling over myself, it reminds me that just in 6 minutes, I can change my physical experience and my emotional experience for the day. I believe in calibrating time in this crazy rat race world, okay? The third principle is energy of activation. If you haven't read the book Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor, I highly recommend it. But he talks in there about the individual who gets home at night from a long day and who really wants to go exercise. He really wants to. But what he ends up doing is he walks in, he picks up the remote control, and he sits down and watches TV. What Sean Aker at Harvard showed us is that 20 seconds makes all the difference in breaking a bad habit. He had individuals take the remote control from the living room and go put it in the bedroom drawer. And if it was 20 seconds more energy to go get that thing that initiated his bad habit, they were able to break it. Conversely, if somebody wanted to exercise in the morning, he would have them go to sleep in their exercise clothes to reduce energy of activation, building a healthier habit. Energy of activation, okay? My grandpa Rex, a few years ago, said, "The day I can't tie my lure on my line is the day I'm ready to die." And a few weeks ago, he alerted the family that he's hung up his fishing rods. And I don't doubt that he's not going to be with us much longer. The man lives to fish. And when he checks out, none of us are anticipating a big inheritance. He and my grandmother have lived a beautiful life. They might have a couple grand in the bank account when they finally sign off. But what he has left us with is something that I think is far more valuable, and that is a template for healthy aging. So the question is, how long do you want to live? What do you want to do with those years? And how much control do you think you have over it? Bolé.